Hi, my name is Elias. My wife, Sophia, and I have now been formally separated for over 2 months. That timeline seems almost laughably short when measured against the sheer emotional wreckage of those 60-something days. The immediate aftermath was a desolate, empty space where our future used to be, replaced only by a stinging, constant ache in my chest. I felt like an explorer who had spent decades charting a beautiful, distant island, only to realize upon landing that it was nothing more than a mirage shimmering over barren salt flats. That realization was the most profound pain, the kind that steals your breath and your will to move forward. The initial weeks were a spiral of self-destruction and desperate attempts to reclaim what was lost. I became intimately familiar with the bottom of a bottle, using cheap whiskey as a temporary solvent for the trauma of betrayal. There were several regrettable nights where I'd call Sophia, the words slurring out as tears streamed down my face, begging her to see the family we could still build. I'd yell too, in moments of raw, unadulterated fury, demanding to know how she could so carelessly shatter the life I had meticulously prepared for us. The volatility of those interactions exhausted us both. I had retired early, a strategic decision made years ago to ensure I had the time and freedom to dedicate myself entirely to our family life. That nest egg, the years of grueling work, the foresight, it was all meant to be the solid foundation for our shared dream. To discover her infidelity and her subsequent refusal to even consider stopping her behavior felt like a cruel cosmic joke. It wasn't just the betrayal, it was the nullification of my life's most significant investment, rendering all my sacrifices meaningless. I was left with a horrifying sense of having nothing. The despair reached such a critical mass that it warped my entire perspective, leaving me in a state of existential freefall. The phrase, "nothing left to live for," became a constant, silent drone in the back of my mind, a chilling mantra of absolute hopelessness. I reached a point of such profound emotional anguish that I actually made preparations to end my life, driven by the conviction that ceasing to exist was the only way to escape the excruciating reality. It was Sophia, paradoxically, who found me and intervened, her frantic presence pulling me back from the terrifying precipice of that final, irreversible decision. She had always known how to find the essential, core version of me. In the chaos of that initial shock, I had reconnected with Clara, a woman I had dated briefly many years ago before Sophia and I became serious. This reconnection, initially tentative and accidental, quickly became the unintentional anchor I desperately needed to navigate the storm. We settled into a consistent rhythm, meeting once or twice every week, a simple, non-committal engagement that asked nothing of me except my presence. These meetings became small islands of quiet sanity in the sprawling ocean of my grief, offering a shelter from the raging current of my despair. Our time together was often spent on long, winding paths through the city's largest park, a sprawling green space that offered a welcome respite from the suffocating closeness of my apartment walls. The sheer scale of the old trees and the vastness of the sky helped to put my personal drama into a much-needed perspective. Sometimes we walked for miles in profound, comfortable silence, the only sound the crunch of gravel under our feet, allowing the quiet presence of nature to soothe my frayed nerves. We would move as two shadows, companionably sharing the immense weight of the moment without the need for hollow words. Other times we would share fragmented thoughts or memories, careful not to probe the depths of the pain, but merely to acknowledge its existence, like two travelers pointing out distant, formidable peaks on the horizon. Clara's silence was not vacant, it was rich and expectant, encouraging me to fill it only when I had something honest to say. This connection was, and remains, strictly platonic, a pure form of friendship that felt almost spiritual in its non-demand. It was a refreshing change from the high-stakes, transactional nature of my married life. Clara, who had always possessed a quiet, centered intensity, introduced me to the concept of mindfulness and non-reactive meditation. She suggested a seemingly simple, yet incredibly difficult, daily exercise, spending an hour sitting quietly, observing every thought that arose without judgment or emotional reaction. The instruction was to merely watch the thoughts, the anger, the sadness, the yearning, as if they were clouds passing overhead. It was about recognizing the thought as a transient event, not an absolute truth or a command for action. This practice required the kind of patience I had long since forgotten how to cultivate. She encouraged me to meditate specifically on the difference between reality and desire. Reality was the present moment, the feeling of the chair beneath me, the sound of traffic outside, the undeniable fact of the separation. Desire was the constant, nagging wish for a different reality, the desire for Sophia to return, the desire for the past to be undoable, the desire for the pain to vanish. To see this distinction, to acknowledge the desire and then gently let it go, was the first tentative step toward freedom. It was a conscious severing of the link between thought and suffering. Clara's guidance was practical and gentle, urging me to integrate small, manageable daily changes that would steer me toward a better version of myself. It was about stopping the cycle of being emotionally paralyzed by the past, abandoning the anxious, speculative hope for an impossible future, and choosing instead to live mindfully and fully in the authentic, real world of the present moment. Each small, conscious action was a vote for my own recovery and self-respect, a tiny assertion of my autonomy over the chaos. I began with mundane things like making my bed immediately and preparing a healthy breakfast. As I reluctantly, and then diligently, committed to the daily practice of observation, a truly surprising and profound shift began to occur within my emotional landscape. The thick, tar-like quality of my anger towards Sophia, which had felt so permanent and justified, started to thin out and dissipate. It wasn't a sudden, dramatic cleansing, but a gradual, subtle melting away, like ice under a persistent sun, revealing the solid ground beneath. I realized that my anger was merely a defense mechanism, a noisy shield protecting my pride. My previous, self-pitying narrative had been simple. I had given her a good life, a secure life, and therefore I was owed her unwavering fidelity and commitment. I saw my provision as a transaction, a guarantee of a reciprocal, defined behavior. The revelation that emerged from the silence of meditation was the stark clarity of my own conditional love. I had loved her, yes, but I had demanded an outcome, a perfect, stable family, as the return on my emotional investment. My love had been a kind of unspoken contract, and her betrayal was simply the ultimate breach of those terms. The colossal weight that lifted from my shoulders when I finally understood this was breathtaking, like being able to breathe deeply for the first time in months. The realization was, I no longer expected that reciprocation. I could love her genuinely, purely, and yet entirely divorced from any expectation of her actions or presence in my life. It was love as an internal state of goodwill, not a bargaining chip in a relationship negotiation. This was a form of love I hadn't known I was capable of, a release from the burdens of possessiveness. I still loved Sophia, that much is an undeniable truth, etched deeply into the fabric of my being. However, the mindful separation allowed me to see with painful clarity that I cannot fix her. The delusion that I was the sole keeper of her happiness, or the orchestrator of her redemption, finally crumbled. My love does not grant me the superhuman responsibility or the power to undo the deep-seated issues that led to her self-destructive behavior. She is an adult, and her healing must be her own journey, taken on her own terms. I recognized that while she still loved me, too, her actions were not a reflection of that love's absence, but rather a tragic symptom of her own unresolved childhood trauma. That early wounding had followed her into our marriage, a silent, invisible parasite that demanded constant validation and external proof of worth. She carried an inner narrative of inadequacy that no amount of external stability or affection could truly satisfy, always looking for the next fix. When she couldn't find the perfect, idealized affirmation she sought in our stable but demanding life, the trauma compelled her to seek quick, fleeting, no strings attached validation elsewhere. Her cheating wasn't a choice to hurt me, but a desperate, flawed attempt to soothe the screaming child inside her who felt perpetually unworthy. This new understanding transformed my anger into a profound, if sad, compassion for her plight. Our last face-to-face interaction, which took place just a few weeks ago, was remarkably different from the volatile, tear-soaked scenes that preceded it. The atmosphere was, for the first time since the separation, genuinely pleasant and light. We met for coffee at a neutral spot, and instead of navigating a minefield of accusations and regrets, we simply joked and laughed with an ease that felt completely foreign to our recent dynamic. We talked about old inside jokes and trivial memories, a brief, beautiful echo of the happier times, but without the underlying tension of expectation. It was during this meeting, perhaps due to the quiet work I had been doing internally, that a final, solid truth settled within me. I no longer want her to come back. This wasn't a bitter, angry rejection, but a calm, compassionate acknowledgement of incompatible realities. The desperation that had fueled my pleading calls had evaporated, replaced by a quiet, self-assured sense of peace that finally saw her as a separate entity, not as a missing piece of myself. The desire for reunion was gone, leaving behind only the simple wish for her well-being. For the first time, I was able to observe the pain I had unintentionally inflicted upon her. My obsessive need to build my ideal family, to have my ideal wife, meant I was constantly, subtly trying to mold her into a specific shape. My own unconscious perfectionism had cast a long, oppressive shadow over her sense of self-worth. I saw the quiet desperation in her eyes, the strain of never quite feeling good enough or meeting my unspoken, often rigid standards of domestic perfection. I realized my love had been a kind of demanding performance review, where she constantly felt she was failing to achieve a passing grade. I had been loving her conditionally, and my conditions had become her cage, prompting her to lash out against the perceived constraint. My attempts to convince her to return, or to shame her into fidelity, now appeared selfishly motivated, rooted in my own fear of loss rather than true concern for her well-being. Looking at her across the table, I recognized a deeply frustrated and wounded soul, someone who sought external, temporary relief from a profound sense of inadequacy. Her need for those no-strings, attached relationships was a desperate, unhealthy attempt to bandage the gaping, unhealed wounds of her childhood. She was trying to change the rules of our relationship in the most destructive way possible, all because she lacked the inner resources to heal herself through honest introspection. This new clarity allowed me to achieve what felt like unconditional love, or at least unconditional acceptance. I could love her as a person, flawed, broken, and beautiful, without needing her to fulfill my narrative or remain within my boundaries. This acceptance provided a powerful, unexpected sense of closure. However, that acceptance came with a fiercely guarded self-respect. Loving her without condition does not equate to letting her cross my personal boundaries or requiring me to continually endure the pain her choices caused. The line is drawn. I wish her peace, but I cannot be her partner. Concurrent with this internal revolution, my relationship with Clara had blossomed into something truly unique, something I never knew could exist outside of romantic expectations. It was a friendship forged in the silent crucible of my pain, growing in a way that defied all the scripts I had previously held for emotional connection. It had nothing to do with attraction or future potential, and everything to do with pure, unwavering presence, a sanctuary of calm. The physical aspect of a new relationship, the hand-holding, the first kiss, the intimacy, was completely absent, a non-factor in our connection. We maintained a respectful, deliberate distance, allowing the emotional and intellectual bond to deepen without the confusion of physical desire clouding the waters. This abstinence was not a test, but a mutual recognition that our connection existed on a much higher, more essential plane. I found myself deleting all my various dating profiles. I recognized that my frantic swiping had been nothing more than a desperate, clumsy attempt to seek external validation, a quick fix for a self-worth that felt irreparably damaged. Matching with pretty girls, engaging in flirtatious banter, or even setting up dates was a hollow, fleeting attempt to prove I was still desirable, still capable of attracting attention. Clara's quiet, steadfast attention made that frantic searching feel utterly meaningless. Now, my time with Clara was simple, genuine, and profoundly restorative. We would walk for hours, sometimes in light conversation about work or books, and sometimes descending into a shared, deep silence where we would simply meditate together. We sat on park benches, side by side, eyes closed, letting the internal storm rage and subside, emerging renewed. This shared silence, this mutual commitment to observation, was more intimate and connecting than any physical act could have been. Clara, a woman who worked 60 or more hours every week, building her own successful, demanding career, still carved out specific time and energy for me. She was not a therapist or a life coach. She was simply an old friend who saw a man in need and responded with extraordinary, selfless generosity. She was using her most precious and non-renewable resource, her time, to gently shepherd me toward my own recovery. Her actions were the definition of showing up, not with platitudes or pity, but with a peaceful, grounding presence and actionable tools for healing. Her loyalty was to my well-being, not to any personal gain or romantic future. That kind of kindness, the type that is offered without expectation, debt, or agenda, is exceedingly rare in the modern, transactional world. It felt like finding a freshwater spring in a parched desert. She offered me the gift of peace and clarity, helping me to gently guide my shattered inner world back toward equilibrium. Her presence provided a stark, beautiful contrast to the tumultuous, emotional landscape of my marriage, teaching me that true connection is built on shared intention and presence, not shared trauma or desperate dependence. The profound realization was that connection is not about what you get from the other person, but the quality of the presence you share. The greatest lesson I've absorbed through this separation and subsequent recovery is the imperative to spend time reflecting instead of reacting. The immediate, visceral reaction to betrayal, the primal urge to lash out, to scream, to despair, is merely the ego's defense mechanism, a reflexive flinch away from truth. Reflection, conversely, is the thoughtful, measured process of internalizing and learning from the painful input, which is the only true pathway to growth and resolution. When you are first confronted with betrayal, you are instantly overwhelmed by a maelstrom of raw, powerful emotions. You are desperately hurt, consumed by a scorching anger that feels absolutely justified, and you crave immediate relief from the unbearable pressure. The natural, unhealthy inclination is to numb yourself, to reach for substances, for alcohol, or for the shallow, fleeting validation of meaningless flings to silence the screaming in your soul. These are all forms of escape, not solutions. There is also the toxic, tempting allure of revenge, the fantasy of evening the score, and inflicting reciprocal pain that somehow equals the measure of your own suffering. You yearn for someone, anyone, to tell you that you are the righteous victim, to validate your brokenness and confirm your partner is the sole villain in the narrative. This desire for external affirmation only traps you further in the victim mindset, preventing any internal recovery. And most tragically, you desperately want to travel backward in time, to magically rebuild the past exactly as you envisioned it, ignoring the deep structural cracks that were already there. You want the illusion back because the illusion was comfortable and predictable. You must realize that the past you mourn was an unstable fantasy, and clinging to it is the source of your present agony. The cold, hard truth of the matter is that the past is immovable, a history book whose pages cannot be rewritten, and the future remains stubbornly, gloriously uncertain. You can worry about yesterday and plan for tomorrow, but you can only live right now. The only sphere of existence over which you truly possess sovereignty is the present moment, the infinitesimal sliver of time that exists right now, and the conscious actions you choose to take within it. This single realization shifts the entire focus of your energy from futile regret to potent, actionable choice. You stop being a spectator in your own life, waiting for something to happen to you, and become the active agent of your healing. This is the difference between passive suffering and active transformation. Your partner's infidelity or destructive behavior stems from a deep, internal wellspring of their own brokenness, their own unhealed history. You must understand that being with you did not fix them, because no external relationship, no matter how loving or stable, can ever repair an internal wound. The responsibility for their wholeness was never yours to bear. Similarly, continuing to cling to them, or allowing their behavior to define you, will certainly not fix you either. You cannot use their chaos as a distraction from your own necessity for self-inventory. Your healing is an independent project powered entirely by your own intentionality and requires a firm, self-compassionate boundary. You must step away from their story to write your own next chapter. It is absolutely true that they loved you, perhaps fiercely, deeply, and genuinely at one point. But through their own damage and poor choices, they have simply forgotten or lost the ability to love you in a healthy, committed way. This isn't a reflection of your worth. It is a profound reflection of their capacity, a flaw in their wiring, not in yours. Their actions say far more about their inner turmoil than they ever could about your deservingness. The dissolution of a marriage, regardless of the circumstances, is a brutal education in impermanence. Every relationship, every structure, every phase of life is temporary. Even the most successful marriage, lasting until the end of life, is merely a preparation for its inevitable conclusion. Everything ends, and understanding this deep truth allows you to appreciate what you have while you have it, and release it gracefully when it is gone. Marriage is, in a way, just the longest, most complicated preparation for divorce, be it literal or by death. The key to surviving this kind of foundational trauma is to immediately and intentionally surround yourself with people who are grounded in reality, not those who co-sign your delusions or feed your rage. Ditch the friends who encourage you to get blind drunk or talk endlessly about revenge plots. Seek out those who live mindfully, who confront hard truths, and who offer practical, quiet support rather than dramatic validation. These are the people who will anchor you when the tide threatens to pull you under, who remind you to breathe, to eat, and to sleep when your body forgets how. They don't need to fix you. They just need to be a stable, reliable presence in a world that feels suddenly chaotic and unreliable. This supportive network is a vital layer of protection against self-destruction. When the urge to engage in self-pity or destructive behavior takes hold, when you find yourself mindlessly scrolling through social media or reaching for the bottle, you must execute a radical shift in your attention. Put everything down immediately, silence the inner monologue, and move your body. The body is always in the present moment, and moving it is the fastest way to reconnect your mind with reality. Take a deliberate, purposeful walk, focusing entirely on the sensory details of the real world. This is an exercise. It's a mindfulness practice masquerading as a stroll. Feel the solid, undeniable ground under your feet as you take each step, a powerful reminder of your physical presence and connection to the earth, the one thing that remains reliably beneath you. Be acutely aware of the wind on your skin, the subtle variations in temperature and pressure, an acknowledgement that you are alive and interacting with the world. Notice the sounds, the smells, the subtle shifts in light, forcing your mind out of the loop of rumination and into the five senses. Turn your face to the sun, even if it's veiled by clouds, and absorb the warmth and the light, a simple, pure gift that requires nothing of you but acceptance. This is the process of mindfulness, recognizing that you are a being of the present moment, surrounded by objective reality, not a victim trapped perpetually in the trauma of the past. The path ahead, whether it is long and arduous or shorter than you anticipate, must be walked one mindful step at a time, away from the shadows and toward the light. Each walk is a victory over inertia and despair. The most potent tool in this journey is the observing of your pain without judgment. Don't try to intellectualize it, analyze it, or push it away. Just sit with it, acknowledge its shape, its texture, and its intensity. When the thought of her or the burning regret arrives, do not chase it, do not engage in dialogue with it. Simply say, there is the thought of regret, and watch it pass. This gentle, non-reactive observation allows the painful memory or emotion to lose its power over you. By watching it, you separate yourself from it, recognizing that you are the observer, not the feeling itself. The feeling is temporary, but the observer is constant. This separation, this quiet distance, is the foundational act of letting go of the past, allowing the emotional grip to slacken slowly. You must become hyper-aware of your daily choices, constantly performing an honest inventory of whether your actions are designed to increase or decrease your suffering, both in the short term and the long run. The short-term relief of alcohol brings the long-term suffering of a hangover, self-loathing, and emotional regression. The short-term discomfort of sitting still in meditation brings the long-term relief of emotional clarity and fortitude. Choose wisely, understanding that the choices that feel the hardest right now, the choice to be honest, to be quiet, to be patient, are the ones that yield the greatest long-term peace. This discipline is the true work of self-love. The work of healing is not merely self-serving, it is a compassionate duty. Your focus should be a threefold commitment to easing pain. First, the tireless, intentional work of easing your own suffering through mindful choices and rigorous self-care. Second, extending that compassion outward to ease the pain of others who cross your path, recognizing that everyone is fighting a hidden battle. And finally, and perhaps most surprisingly, finding the emotional maturity to wish well and strive to ease the pain of the one who hurt you. This last step is the ultimate act of liberation, as it removes the final anchor of bitterness and resentment that would otherwise tether you forever to the betrayal. Wishing Sophia peace is the final act of self-forgiveness, because it means I am no longer defined by the narrative of her failure. I am free. It is a profound universal truth that we do not grow from comfort. The periods of greatest growth, the moments where we truly forge inner strength, are found exclusively within discomfort and suffering. This catastrophic failure of your marriage, this shattering of your idyllic vision, is not a tragedy intended to destroy you. It is a severe, painful, but ultimately invaluable catalyst for profound personal change. This is your singular, difficult chance to grow. You have the opportunity to transform into a fundamentally better, more compassionate, and immeasurably stronger version of yourself. The pain is the friction, the resistance that sculpts you, forging steel from softer metal. Do not run from it, do not medicate it, simply observe it, allow it to be, and learn the lessons it is desperate to teach you. By embracing the discomfort, by seeing it as the engine of your transformation, you actively participate in your own evolution. The quiet, internal restructuring that follows such a major loss requires time and immense patience, but the rewards are freedom and clarity. The desperate, grasping hope for the return of an old, Flawed life will eventually be replaced by a profound and peaceful certainty that good things will come. They will appear sooner than your currently traumatized mind can possibly comprehend, but they will arrive only after you have consciously chosen to step fully and mindfully into the present. The happiness that awaits is one you will have built yourself, brick by conscious brick, and it will be stable, authentic, and truly your own. That new reality is already being built right now by the small, intentional choices you are making.